Hello, welcome to Dan Explains It All. Today we're talking about Dweller. Dweller is a phase repeater. What's a phase repeater? Well, if you take a phaser and you put a delay inside of it, that's a phase repeater. So you probably heard of 4-stage, 8-stage, 10-stage phasers. You might not know what those stages are. You don't really need to know what those stages are. But normally there's no delay inside of them. What we did, we gave you a knob to put delay inside of each of those stages. So that's a phase repeater, and that's Dweller. Let's talk about some of the controls on Dweller. It's got 2 toggle switches and 5 knobs. There's a mix control, lets you go from fully dry signal to fully wet signal. There's a rate and depth control. Those act just like they would on a normal phaser. They make it go faster or slower, shallower or deeper. And there's a Regen control that makes your phasing sound more intense and kind of extra deep in a way. We'll walk through that later. And then there's 2 toggle switches. One of them controls the voice. It does a 4-stage or 8-stage phaser. The other one controls the wave, which is either a sine wave, triangle wave, or a pseudo-random step function for the phaser itself. And then we've got a stretch control, and that's where you add delay to each of those phaser stages. So that's where the fun happens. And then standard in-jack, out-jack. There's an expression control we'll talk about later. 9-volt center negative DC standard pedal power. I think it's 46 milliamps, something like that. And soft touch relay switching, so real quiet when you turn it on and off. Here's my clean signal. Running a Fender Jaguar through an Otis Trudeau. Otis Trudeau, is that what it's called? Yeah. Cool. So let's bring the stretch control all the way down and listen to some of the phaser sounds. I'm going to start with a 4-stage sine wave. Bring the depth all the way down, it stops moving. It's basically just your dry signal at that point. As you bring the depth up, you get more seasick, wobbly sounds. And you can bring the rate all the way down so it stops moving. Or bring it up so you get real slow, deep phase. Or crank it until it's just ridiculous. I'm going to bring the rate back a little bit, start bringing up the regen to show how that affects the phaser sound. You're going to hear that it's just as deep, but it's like on all those frequency notches that it's creating as it sweeps through, they just get a little more intense, and it gets super resonant and just more intense at its edges. So we'll scale that back, go back to a knobs at noon setting, and this is one of my favorite things on a phaser. If you give all wet signal, so you max out your mix control, it turns into kind of a vibrato pedal. So instead of that phaser sound, it has kind of that pitch shifty, vibey vibe. Let's talk about the difference between 4-stage and 8-stage phaser. Basically, 4-stage is like kind of a familiar old school phaser sound. 8-stage has a little more something to it. It's got more notches technically. You don't need to worry about that. That's what you're hearing. So it's just a little more intense of an effect. Now let's check out the different wave shapes. So we're on sine wave right now. There's triangle wave. Pretty similar, just slightly different voices, a little different shape to how it's moving. Now let's go random. So random is where things can get kind of weird. I like to max out the regeneration, so each movement gets really accentuated. Max out the depth so it can move through its full range. And then just set the rate to taste. So on this setting, you don't get the smooth wave of a sine wave or triangle. Essentially, it's randomly sampling at different points, and where you set your rate knob is going to decide how often it samples. So you can sample a lot and get super bubbly, weird sounds, or sample every once in a while and just have these resonant skips as you go through. So those are the phaser sounds of the Dweller phase repeater. So now let's check out the repeats. So in this setting, I'm just going to bring up the stretch just slightly, and you'll hear that at each of those skips to different settings, there's going to be almost like an extra touch of echo around them. That's my favorite setting. That's a fun one. So now if we move back to a sine wave, we'll stick to the 8-stage phaser. You hear how it's still washing through and getting really wavy, but it's like it's getting confused. It's having memories of its former life. And as we bring the stretch up even further, let's go ahead and just max it out all the way. You get these incredibly washed out sounds that aren't a delay into a phaser or a phaser into a delay, but they're what happens when you actually time stretch within that phaser sound. If you bring up your Regen, it's acting kind of like a feedback control now. How a feedback control would work on a delay, you get longer trails. Just basically the signal that comes out at the end gets added back in at the start again. And so just get more intense, more washed out, longer trails. And it'll get very close to oscillating, but it'll never quite get there. What it means to be a phase repeater. Part of being a phase repeater is that the Dweller can actually act as a kind of bummed. They missed it that time. So, part of being a phase repeater means that it can actually become a delay if you bring the depth of the phaser all the way down. So if we bring our stretch up to about middle again, we hear those very washed out phase repeater sounds. And if we just bring the depth all the way down, it's just like a normal delay. It's got a bit of an analog voice, there's some filtering on it, so it's not a super pristine digital delay, just a bit of extra warmth to it. So again, that Regen control acts as a feedback. Those super long trails, but it dies off just enough to not oscillate. And you can get those pitch shifts when you move the stretch control because it's acting like a time control in a delay now. So that's what happens on the delay side of the phase repeater. And I'll go ahead and bring the depth control up just to show how those interact again from the other side. You start to hear how there's still a sense of the timing you had earlier, but it's starting to wash. It's starting to get a little bit confused. Sample signals out of phase with each other now. Bring the Regen down. Now it's just that perfect in between of a delay and a phaser. Dweller, phase repeater. Dweller! So, Another feature of the Dweller is its expression jack. You can use this to plug in an external foot control that takes over for the stretch control. So the knob won't do anything anymore. You get to control the whole thing with your foot. If we bring up our regeneration and depth a little bit, we'll bring the rate down a touch. Let's do 8-stage triangle wave and just walk through some different times. So you can do little shifts to get that kind of pitch shifting, light glitchiness. You can do huge sweeps. You can rock it all the way back to turn it into a phaser, then max it out to just stretch it out into this long form phase repeater, and then right back to a phaser. A lot of fun stuff you can do with your foot. So that's the overall idea of the Dweller. It's a phase repeater. It's kind of a new thing. It's a delay inside of a phaser. It's simple, as long as you spend some time with it. It's available now from Blood Noise Endeavors for $199 all over the place. That's it. Brady, you want to take us out? That's some good Dweller. I said that's some good Dweller.